We all love to talk about our sewing machines, don't we? And yet, right next sits my trusty, handy-dandy serger doing important but unseen work every day and receives absolutely no love. I've received no shortage of comments asking about what machine I have, but this trusty steed? Zilch. Perhaps we have our stepsisters and Cinderella. I've had many an opportunity to dance with the maiden in the glass slipper, so today I think it's time I finally sing her praises in public. Scripting corn, that intro is sewing machine's quite useful, not that evil, and then I should just come up with my own intros if it's so easy. Okay. Not in public. My name is Cornelius Quiring. That's my logo. That's my word mark. And Cornelius.ooh is my website. To understand how a serger works, we first need to understand how a regular sewing machine works. And a regular sewing machine does what's known as a lock stitch. The way a lock stitch works is that our needle and thread pierce through our fabric and go down and underneath. This little pointy thing here, yeah, that's the tip of our needle. Now this here is where we have our bobbin, which of course holds the thread that goes on the underside of the fabric. Now we can't quite see it yet, but there's a pointy little bit just on the outside here that's going to grab the thread off the top needle and spin it around our bobbin case in order to grab this thread and pull it up. All right, editing corn, let's demo that. Right there, that's that pointy little bit that grabbed it. And as we continue to spin, you see how it grabs that thread and pulls it up? And then as the needle makes its way back to the top, the pink thread gets tightened underneath the fabric right there. We can't see it, of course, because the presser foot's in the way. This red thread at the top gets tightened as well, and the whole process repeats itself. To simplify things even more, we have our bottom thread. We then have our top thread, which gets looped down, around, and underneath, pulls up tight, and essentially locks everything in place. Hence, it being a lock stitch. And that's what it looks like. We've all seen this before. Now, sergers, on the other hand, they don't have any bobbins of thread underneath. Instead, it's just these 4 spools of thread here that do all the sewing. And so they do what's known as an overlocking stitch, which is also why most of the world calls these machines overlockers, but only in North America do we call them sergers. And Scripting Corn said we're going to explain that later. But if we open things up underneath, we'll see that 2 of the 4 threads do in fact get fed underneath. This beige thread here ends up being fed to the very tip of this arm here. And as I continue to cycle the machine, the arm goes across past the needles. The needles go down in between the thread and the arm. And then the arm pulls back, creating a loop around my needles. If I may oversimplify things again with my yarn here, essentially the machine is generating a loop like this. My needle then goes through that loop, gets pulled tight. There of course is some thread on the needle, which when it pulls out is what keeps it in place. Another loop is generated. The needle goes through again, pulls tight. Thread that should be on here holds it in place, and so on and so forth. In fact, if we look really close at the stitch, you see how this beige thread loops around like that, and then my 2 needles pierce down in between, back up again, and around to hold that loop in place. Now back to the machine, and you'll see that there's a second arm, this time with the red thread, and it does the exact same thing of creating a loop, but underneath the fabric. And if we look up close, that looks like this. So that explains how we get these loops at the top and bottom where the needle is doing its sewing, but it doesn't explain how we end up getting the loops themselves looping together. Back to the machine one more time, and notice how the arm with the beige thread goes right in between the red thread and arm to create a loop out of those two loops. Now that we understand all the different bits, let's go through the full cycle one more time. The arm with the beige thread goes across the needles. The needle goes down in between thread and arm. And shortly after that, the arm underneath with the red thread pulls back to create a loop for the needle underneath the fabric. And then finally, the red arm goes back out across one more time so that beige thread arm can go in between and create a loop for the loops. And the cycle just keeps repeating. Easily 1,000 times a minute. 1,000 times a minute. That's pretty wild, huh? So I've got something new that I'm quite excited to be sharing with you. This E7 Pro standing desk from FlexiSpot, the sponsor of this video. And I know what you're thinking, hold on, Corn, what does a standing desk have to do with sewing? Aren't those just for the clickety-clackety computer folk? Well, no. Let me explain. Oh, back pain. If you spent any amount of time hunched over a regular height table, cutting out pattern pieces, well then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Oh, my goodness. It starts to hurt. I simply raise it to my perfect standing height. And no more back pain for this guy. And then, once I'm ready to sew, I just bring the table right down to my perfect sitting height. And away I sew. Next, let's talk about the size of the tabletop. I went for the bamboo option, which has a depth of 35 inches, an absolute must for wide pattern pieces. Oh, and this thing is sturdy. It can hold up to 440 pounds, so more than enough. And smooth to boot. Not a ripple to be seen in my coffee. Oh, and here's the kicker. 15 years warranty. FlexiSpot provides all kinds of premium standing desks, like my E7 Pro here, and ergonomic chairs. If you're looking for a budget-friendly option, they do also have the E7 available. Don't miss out. Shop now, and be sure to use my coupon code to save an extra 50% off your very own E7 Pro Premium Standing Desk. Just click my link down in the description to learn more. All right. The history of the overlocking or serger machine is an interesting one. It was invented in 1881 by a Mr. Merrow, M-E-R-R-O-W, and his wee lad, his son. They started by creating these machines to crochet the top edges of socks to speed things up rather than having to do it by hand. Crocheting in its simplest form is looping threads together. You see where this is going? And then they kept creating different versions of this machine until they came up with the overlocking stitch that we know today. It's also sometimes called an overedge stitch. Mr. Merrow really wanted it to be called a marrowing stitch. I mean, they're still trying to make marrowing stitch a thing. Come to think of it, they're the OGs of trying to make fetch happen, you know? And finally, it's also called serging. This here is a blade. It cuts the fabric for a nice clean edge before it gets stitched. Now it's this little knife here that makes this a serger. That's right, some machines don't have this blade here. So if the fabric is pre-cut, it's called serging, and if it isn't, it's called overlocking. But truthfully, use whichever one you want. They're both correct. But back to our story. While Mr. Merrow and his chap were busy working away on their machines, well, there was a few other folks over at Wilcox and Gibbs working on their own version of the overlocking stitch. And yeah, things got a touch heated. A legal tussle ensued, and well, eventually, Mr. Merrow and his boy emerged victorious, and therefore they get to claim ownership of having invented the overlocking stitch. Now, sergers definitely started out as a commercial technology, and over time eventually became available for home sewists like myself. And, well, there was one group of folks over in Japan who were creating industrial sergers, made a home version and brought it over to upper management and said, look what we've created. Upper management then immediately said, yeah, no thanks, cut that out. And they said, cool, yeah, no, we'll just take that and start our own company. What's the name of that company? Juki. So if we have upper management to thank for anything, it's that they help spur innovation and growth. Definitely not at their own companies, no, but other new companies. So thank you, upper management. I've got pattern drafting and sewing courses available at that URL right there. Now, I've spent all this time yakking about how they work, the history, and I haven't even bothered to cover what they're used for. Depending on what type of fabric you're working with, once you've gone ahead and cut it, it's only a matter of time before the raw edge starts disintegrating. Put it through a few wash cycles and yeah, that thing's going in the trash. So serging exists to protect the raw edge of your fabrics from fraying. And check just about any one of your garments. Chances are you'll see it somewhere. It's also by far the fastest way of getting that done, which is why it's become so ubiquitous. What I've been showing you up until this point is a non-stretchy woven fabric. This machine is also used to make stretchy garments like t-shirts, hoodies, sweatpants, and those are knit fabrics. In this instance, not only is that stitch protecting the raw edge of the fabric, those two stitches that go up and down, yeah, those are actually holding the two or more layers of fabric together. And what's amazing is there's even a little bit of stretch in this stitch, which makes it perfect for this use case. I mean, who knew a bit of loop in a thread could do so much? Now, what do we do with the little tail ends at the beginning and end of every stitch? Well, we have two options. Option number one is to take some sort of a big eye needle like this one and thread that end into there like so. Run the needle underneath the loops and then go ahead and tug it into itself like that. Snip off the end. That is not going anywhere. The other option is to look for the two threads that have been sewn by the needle. In my case, that's the black and white ones. And then I find them within the tail and simply proceed to pull them out, which will, of course, unravel all of the threads in the tail. Tie those loose threads in a knot a couple times, snip, and all done. Now that trick of unraveling the tail of the stitch is also the key of how to remove the stitch should you have possibly made an oopsie poopsie. I get a nice tight grip on that black and white thread and then pull on the fabric to cause a gather, push that gather along, and then just keep repeating until I pull that black and white thread all the way out. And then the two looping threads peel off in an ever so satisfying manner. Here's a fun fact. We can do more than just this one basic stitch with our sergers. For example, we can do this faux flat lock stitch. With a flat lock stitch, the fabrics are butted up against each other with just a little bit of overlap and then stitched together like so. The benefit being that it greatly reduces the bulk of the seam. This is something that you see quite often with activewear. To do this stitch, I cut the thread and remove this inside needle. Gorgeous! I'm also going to reduce the thread tension for the remaining needle right down to 0. From here, I just sew the fabric like I normally would, and then the fun part is pulling it open. So this is what it looks like on the top of the garment, and this is what it looks like on the underside. There's only industrial flat locking machines for now that I'm aware of, which is why this stitch matters. But if you do know of any, please share down in the comments, because I'd love to get one. We can also get specialty presser feet for our sergers, like this one, which allows us to sew some elastic into our stitch. Pretty cool. You can also get 5-thread sergers, which add this one extra stitch next to your serge stitch, and it's called a safety stitch. Essentially just adds more strength and rigidity to the garment. You're going to see this a lot on jeans, for example. And finally, you can even get serger/cover stitch combo machines. Now, what's a cover stitch? With a regular hem, you usually end up double folding your fabric so that the raw edge gets encased on the inside to prevent it from fraying. But with a cover stitch, you only have to do one single fold over, like so, run the stitch, and voila! The raw edge has been beautifully encased in this webbing style stitch. The benefit being that it, once again, reduces bulk. Also, check the bottom of your t-shirt. Chances are very likely it's been cover stitched. And now, I pass my talking scissors over to you. If you've got a serger, show it some love down in the comments. It's well deserved at this point. What kind of machine do you have? Are there any interesting details about sergers that I've left out that you think others should know about? Anything serger related? Share it down in the comments. We're at the end of the video. And chances are that means you're interested in what I'm doing here. And you just might also be interested in the Corn Cob Club. As a member, you get exclusive content. You get big old juicy discounts on my courses. There's a group chat. And you could even get your name in the videos like these here wonderful folks. A massive thank you to everyone who is already a member. And if you're interested in checking it out, well, head on over to that URL right there or hit the join button here on YouTube. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've had a good day. Continue to have a good day or night, whatever time it may be. Au revoir. I don't know how to say bye in Spanish. I was going to say hasta la vista, but that's not it. All right, whatever. We've left enough time for you to choose one of these videos to click. I'm gone. Bye. I just went